Talking all things South Carolina Gamecocks spring football with our good friend JC Shurburtt of the Big Spur as South Carolina prepares to enter year 4 of the Shane Beamer era in Columbia, South Carolina, and the Garnet Black Spring Game just around the corner. JC, what's going on, my man? Appreciate you taking the time.
Hey, great to be with you, Chris. Good to be talking a little spring football. Certainly, this sport seems to always have at least something to talk about 365 days a year. So good to be on with you.
So, JC, let's start with this. After a tough year 3, of course, South Carolina sits just a couple weeks away from the spring game. It'll be a night kickoff at Williams-Brice Stadium yet again, which has been a wild success. Under Shane Beamer, obviously Gamecock Nation will show up and show out and create a fun atmosphere there at Williams-Brice Stadium. What's been the mood in your mind for spring ball? I'm sure there's a lot of chip on the shoulder, a lot of determination. I mean, again, anytime you miss a bowl game, right, you're itching to get back after it. But from what you've taken away from Shane Beamer's comments and what you've heard from the football team as a whole, like what's been that mentality getting back after it after what was really a long and frustrating offseason?
Yeah, I think they had a pretty good offseason in the weight room and the winter program. And then, you add a lot of new players and new coaches. It's going to be fundamentally different, whether that's good or bad. I think their practices have always been high energy and enthusiastic under Beamer. You got a lot of high energy guys you brought in, though, like a Sean Elliott, like a Mike Fury, and like a Joe DeCamillis. Nobody mentions Joe when that happens, but if you grew up watching NFL football, or like I did, I used to watch the Broncos all the time and the Falcons with Dan Reeves as a coach. Joe DeCamillis is a wild man, on the sidelines, and I think a lot of special teams coordinators are. Pete Limbo is a little more cerebral, but most special teams guys are wild. So, hey, yeah, he's getting after it too. The elder statesman of the staff and a new addition. I think running back an upgrade at that coaching spot was long overdue. I think we've all can agree on that. And they've got a lot of new players. I think staying healthy is important, and knock on wood, for the most part, during spring, they've been good. And that's not really when it hit last year. It started with a spring game last year, and then fall camps when it really kind of devastated the roster. So we still have some breath holding to do in that department. But there's more depth on the D-line than there has been under Beamer at all. I think with the line, I call it the linebacker switcheroo. They got 2 guys left, Pup Howard and Stone Blanton, 2 4-star guys that are going to have good careers. And they went home, Mississippi State and Florida. Well, then the guy, Kamara, and then the other kid whose name escapes me, I think Washington, who they got out of the portal from Charlotte. Those 2 guys are faster. Not saying they're better. I'm saying faster. So you improve your speed there. Bam Martin Scott is poised to have a really good year. Of course, Debo Williams is back. He was all SEC, according to some last season. So you feel better about the linebackers. I haven't even mentioned J.R. Johnson, used to be called Fred Johnson, and Wendell Gregory. The staff is extremely high on those 2 young players. They're both 6'3.5", 6'4", 225, how you draw them up types of guys. I mentioned the line, you got a healthy JT Gear. You got Kyle Kennard, who the staff had ranked as the top end in the portal coming over from Georgia Tech. You got Dylan Stewart, 5-star guy. Desmond Umeozulu's a year older. Elijah Davis has found a home out there as a bigger end, kind of in the mold of Tyreek Johnson, who departed the program as a 8th-year senior or whatever last year. So you got more of a chance. Gilbert Edmonds home. He comes back and was a starter. Interior wise, Boogie Huntley, Taka Hemingway, TJ Sanders. Everybody knows who those guys are. They need to be more consistent. And I think I've been saying that for a while, but they've all had moments, especially last year with Sanders and 2 years ago with Tonka. And then you bring in DeAndre Jules, Michael Goodwine, Nick Barrett was not healthy all year last year. He's back and healthy. He's that big 325 guy you can plug in a 3-man deal that can play pretty well. Even Jamal Weish is a guy that he's the lone survivor of what was a bust city 4-man D tackle class a few years ago. He's coming on. Mm-hmm. So the Gamecocks could roll, and Jerome Simmons isn't even there yet, and he's different than the rest of them. So Travian Robertson in the style of the late great Brad Lawing could end up rotating a lot more this year up front. And then the secondary, Nick Emenware, DQ Smith, Jelon Kilgore. There's not a lot of schools. I'm sure there are a handful, but there's not a lot of schools that can have those three guys on the field at safety. I mean, their Gamecocks are blessed with that. You got a battle at corner. Judge Collier looks like the favorite. I wouldn't rule out veteran David Spalding again if he can stay healthy. Vakari Swain, Emery Floyd, Jalua Solomon will be in that mix when he gets back, and then O'Donnell Fortune on the other side. So I say all that. That's a mouthful because we talked defense first. You didn't ask me to talk defense because I don't think there's any reason why this defense can't be much improved. I mean, there's absolutely no excuse, barring a rash of injuries. And that's going to be the caveat every single time with this team and this program is injuries. There's no reason why they can't be better. I mean, you've got depth, you've got players that are proven, you got players that are proven but need to be more consistent. You got good young talent. I mean, it's time. It's time to get back to playing good defense at the University of South Carolina.
And JC, sticking with the defensive side of the football, because you mentioned a slew of new faces. Obviously, South Carolina was one of those that overhauled their roster with transfer portal pieces. But on the defensive side, we saw South Carolina defensively struggle mightily for what was 2/3 of the season, basically last year. Last third of the season or so started to come on strong at the end. I know there were some scheme changes going from the 4-2-5 to the 3-3-5. From what you're hearing, and again, I'm sure they're not giving out industry secrets or anything in practice, but are you hearing, is that something they're implementing in the spring? Have they reverted back to the 4-2-5? Or, I mean, I know obviously talent has upgraded, but is there a reason to believe that maybe a change in scheme or an adjustment from the scheme perspective is going to help them out this season as well?
I think they're going to mix and match. And a lot of schools do that. I think when you look at what they had last year, we'll start with the front, because I think there's two reasons really for the defensive turnaround, and one is talked about a lot with the 3-3-5, the other maybe not so much. I think what happened last year when you looked at the talent, Chris. All right, so you're in a 4-down front. You're relying on your edge players to get pressure. Well, who did they have at edge? Well, you had Jordan Strawn, and it makes me sick to think about, because Jordan Strawn at the end of 2021 and beginning of 2022, before he got hurt, was really coming on. It was probably an NFL draft pick. He just wasn't the same. Wasn't the same. A tick behind. You'd watch it. He was a half second away every single time getting pressure. Tough year for him. And then on the other side, scratch your head. Who knows? It's either maybe Brian Thomas or Tyreek Johnson. Brian Thomas is up to 245. I think he could make some noise this year too, but he wasn't last year, and it's just not an ideal situation. So what they ended up doing is, those guys like Bam Martin Scott and then Jerron Willis to a lesser extent, you started getting those guys on the field, and they are your best pass rushers. So Carolina, through some exotic blitzes and stuff, they were able to get to the passer more consistently. I also think when you look at Boogie Huntley and Taka Hemingway, those guys are like in the 280, 290-ish. They're actually built more like 3-4 ends in a lot of schemes, like an Alabama scheme or a Georgia scheme, than maybe your traditional inside tackle. They're not nose guys. They're not lining up right over center. TJ Sanders did that, but they're kind of that, they're not as heavy as maybe some other like 3 techniques. So I think that helped them play more free. I think at the back end, they figured out who's the nickel, who are the safeties. Because they kept switching it. It was DQ Smith, he gets burned. It was Nick Emenware, he gets burned. They finally settled on Jelon Kilgore, who got in there and played it well, and that allowed Nick and DQ to settle in at safety. And I think that was kind of an understated thing, because if you think about some of the problems against Mississippi State and against Florida, when they're just giving up pass plays in droves, it was one-on-one with the nickel in a lot of cases. Other schools, I kept talking last year, schools have figured this out. Now that's what they figured out. Well, Jelon is kind of a little different than those other two, and I think he solidified that spot. And I think that's where he's going to stay. So those two things sort of combined to allow them to have a really good finish, something they could build on. But as far as what they're going to do this year, obviously, I just went through the ends and tackles and the depth. You've got the depth to kind of do both, depending on the matchup. And I like that. I kind of like that plan. A lot of good schools do that. They'll game plan and say, oh, well, these guys are susceptible against this and that. You know, and I'm curious to see some other, you know, you got Bam Martin Scott. If you're in a 3-3 out there, well, then you got another linebacker. I'm curious to see, do they stand up a Dylan Stewart who stood up a lot in high school and make him as like a rusher and I mean, you've got a lot of different options where you can be creative and tinker with it. You know, that's why, yeah, it's on Clayton White to figure this out this year, because I think, you know, he's got to be excited with all that he's got, but you got to make it work and make it go. And so that's it's a blessing and a curse, because when you have these guys, expectations obviously get higher, and so you better go make it work.
JC, let's move to the offensive side of the football, and we have to start at the quarterback position. Life after Spencer Rattler has officially begun. Most Gamecock fans you talk to, I'm sure yourself as well, LaNorris Sellers seems to be the heir apparent to take over as QB1. Shane Beamer continues to promote that there is a quarterback competition ongoing. What have you heard from spring ball? Do you buy the fact that there actually is an open competition with Robbie Ashford behind LaNorris Sellers there pushing him? Is this LaNorris Sellers team? And what have you heard about the competition, just the performance of those guys at that position? Because, again, a pivotal spring to figure out who is QB1 and how you're going to replace the production of a departed Spencer Rattler.
Yeah, I think Sellers is in good shape to get it. You know, unless, how do I put this? You know, would I be completely floored and shocked and stunned if something happened? Maybe he showed some signs that he wasn't ready. You know, I don't know. And this is also the first time we've been through a quarterback competition with Dowell Loggins here, so there's no track record to see how he handles it and operates. But I would be very surprised, not shocked, very surprised if LaNorris wasn't the guy. He's been in the system a year. He's an intelligent player. He can make the reads. He's, you know, he's got a lot going for him as far as being the guy that can handle the job at a younger age. I know he's a freshman technically, but there's a lot of second year freshmen that end up starting and playing pretty well. I mean, go back to Johnny Manziel. You know, you can go. Bryce Young started as a redshirt freshman or a sophomore with limited as a backup the year before. So great players, elite players can go play this early. I mean, and I think LaNorris is. You know, so do I think with what Shane's saying is he talks over and over about how this program is built on competition. And so you don't want to, you know, discourage the other guys from competing, because that's only going to make LaNorris Sellers and everybody else better. And you don't want to discourage LaNorris because he's a first-year starter from going out and continuing to work hard. Now, I think the chances of LaNorris not working hard, very slim. I think the other guys would still compete, but I get it. I get why he's saying that. And, you know, you want in that spring game coming up for them to treat it like, hey, my job's on the line. And you want to go out there and perform at a high level, because the more pressure you put on a player in practice and simulations, and that's basically what spring games is, simulation. In these simulation scenarios, the more they're going to be accustomed to it when the actual real thing happens. And so I think that's part of it. But I'd be surprised if it wasn't Sellers, to be honest. And I've heard he's had a good spring.
JC, and a lot of his performance this season is going to be the playmakers around him, right? He can't do it on his own. We saw that with Spencer Rattler. No Rocket Sanders, no Nick Harbor this spring. So some other guys getting some opportunities to step up. Who are some names you've heard emerge at both the running back, the wide receiver? And I guess I'll throw the tight end position in there as well, because certainly there are some contributors there. But who are some other guys you've heard on the offensive side of the football? Maybe some new playmakers or just guys that have emerged as top targets for LaNorris Sellers.
Well, tight end, getting one of my favorite players back, Josh Simon, I think was huge. I've always thought a lot of Josh, this competitiveness, tenacity, athleticism. Kind of had a platoon last year with Trey Knox. Now, as far as that split tight end spot goes, you know, he's the guy. And I thought he made a lot of really nice plays last year, breaks tackles, et cetera. And then with your kind of traditional attached tight end type, Brady Hunt. Now look, I'm going to say this. Don't think Brady Hunt's some lumbering fool out there, right? This guy can play. I mean, he can catch passes, he can run. You know, he's not It's not like, oh, put Brady out there to block and Josh out there to catch passes. That's not going to happen this year. And I think he's got a shot. From what I'm told, they think he could be a pro player one day. I mean, in continuing on the tight end tradition here at South Carolina, which has been here since Jared Cook. I think that, and that's nothing against Willie Scott, the late Willie Scott. I do want to mention him there too. He was the first one way back when. But so that spot at receiver, I mean, I wish I could sit here and rattle off 4 or 5 guys, but I can't. The only one I've heard consistent. And look, now I'll say this, but I'm not at practice. Okay, it's just I haven't had anybody offer a whole lot. As far as this guy's looking good. The only name I've heard is Gage Larvadane, the transfer from Miami of Ohio. He's healthy. Finally, he was injured most of the year last year at Miami. Still caught 42 passes. Still caught 8 for 80 against Miami of Florida. He and Rashad Amos were kind of the whole offense up there. This kid's originally from Louisiana, was a basketball player like Bruce Ellington, goes to play for the Red Hawks, shines. He's absolutely a legit threat at this level. And then, you do have Nick Harbor sitting out. I'll caution everybody. My personal expectations aren't through the roof on Nick this year. I think it'll be another year where he gets a little bit better. But, in football, I'm not against him running track. Actually, everybody should be in favor of him chasing an Olympic dream. But the reality is, the less you play football, the less you practice football, the slower you develop. So it may be a while. I have hopes for Tyshawn Russell. The other guy, I guess I can say this, Mazio Bennett has been a player as a true freshman that's caught the eye of the coaching staff. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's at least in the 2 deep, maybe he starts. So that is another guy. So Gage Larvadane, Mazio Bennett, cross your fingers for Tyshawn Russell and Nick Harbor to get back. And some of these other guys, Luke Doty, I think, and I don't know, he's taking snaps at quarterback from what was reported, but I think the more he works at receiver, the better chance he is that he can be a good contributor. And then they're going to hit the portal. They're going to hit the portal, Chris, afterwards. They're going to try to find 2 more receivers and an offensive tackle. To the last position I mentioned, I say, I bid you good luck, sir, on tackle. But receivers are out there, and they want some bigger body guys to kind of mix with the smaller, faster guys they have. And, so that they should be okay. I don't think you can always count on that. So you better get the guys ready that you got. But I think that that will be the plan. So, yeah, so if you're looking for Gage, Mazio Bennett, those would be the 2 I would circle right now just based on what I've heard. But who knows? There'll be some other guys that certainly will step up in the spring.
JC, how's the running back room looking without Rocket Sanders participating? I know obviously Oscar Attaway was picked up. There was a South Carolina State transfer. And then I'll just ask you the entire running game because obviously the offensive line, it was a struggle last year, right? From game number 1, really all throughout the season, you had some youngsters thrown in the fire. I know, JC, it's you take everything with a grain of salt in the spring. Like, it's really, really tough to draw any sort of conclusions from what the line of scrimmage is doing in spring ball. But there's obviously a lot of new faces. There's some very talented pieces that have been added both in the running back room and the offensive line. From what you've heard, the progression of that room going in this year.
I think the running back room's night and day. I think credit to Taylor Edwards last year. And then, I'm not trying to besmirch the good name of the former running backs coach here, but he didn't really have anything to do with any of this. I think that, Attaway is a player that I just people started volunteering info on him, talking him up, unprovoked, so to speak. And so, he played a lot of ball at North Texas, Chris, a lot of ball. And he kind of rotated last year with a smaller guy who was 5'7", who was from the state of Texas, who, in that offense, they run at North Texas, little scat back types could get things done. But he reminds me a lot of Brandon Wilds, really, with how he runs and can catch the ball. I'm extremely high on Howell, the kid from SC State. I don't know how in the world even SC State didn't know about him until late, man. He's from Mooresville, North Carolina, Charlotte. No shrine book. I mean, nothing. This kid, when you watch him on film, is going to remind everybody of Derek Watson right down to the spin move and number 22. And I hear they think, Rocket and Oscar could be here 1 year and gone, possibly if things go as planned. Obviously, Rocket's going to be out of eligibility. And that this guy, they're not worried about missing on all those running back recruits because they think this guy's going to be the guy. And the good news, if there is good news that Shane was talking about the other day with injuries to Bradley Dunn and Juju McDowell, Bradley Dunn's injury doesn't affect what's going to happen in the fall or what it does is that's a guy that was taking reps, so you don't have to wear your guys out. So now Howell and Attaway are taking a ton of reps. I think that's great for first-year guys in the system. They're going to know the system. They're extremely talented. Haven't heard much on Braswell, Dontavius, and then, of course, Fuller's not here yet, and then they're waiting on Rocket. I'm going to say this about Rocket. The more I think about it, and this is one thing that I think Gamecock Nation is hesitant to get excited about because we've all lived through the lingering injury that lasts, longer than reading a Charles Dickens novel, right? It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. And then it just keeps going, man. We've all read that, right? Mm-hmm. If Rocket Sanders can get healthy and get back to 2022 form, 2023 form, I thought for a while because he's 240 or whatever, maybe he gained some weight because he's been injured. And I went back and saw an interview with Sam Pittman, and Sam was laughing about it and said, you have to cut him with a knife and cut skin off to get him to lose weight. He's like, you pinch him and there's nothing there to lose. So he's not fat. I mean, at least he wasn't fat then when he was 242. I don't know. He hadn't been working out, he's a big kid. He's so talented, Chris. If you can even get him 80% of the way back to where he was in 2022, he could be 1,000-yard rusher. I mean, it's not just that he's a big, fast guy. He's elusive. He's got outstanding vision. He can make people miss. It's kind of systematically very similar to what Kendall Browse and Dan Enos had that was a bad hire by Sam Pittman. I don't know why the hell he did that. Different story. But a Kendall Browse offense, which is kind of similar to Sean Elliott's run game and what Dowell wants to do, and a quarterback, big, tall, running quarterback, he thrived. And you start thinking about the zone read possibilities with Rocket Sanders and Lenora Sellers, and then you got backs behind Sanders, and Sellers it starts to get exciting because Attaway is going to be good. Howell's going to be good. They're all upgrades from last year. No offense to Mario Anderson. They're all better players than Mario. But Rocket's that extra guy. You don't just get all SEC running backs to fall in your lap in the portal very often. And nobody's talking about him because he's been injured. And when they heard he was injured, it's like everybody left the movie. Well, we've seen this movie before. It sucks. Let's leave and go get some popcorn. But I'm telling you, if he can, dude, that would be significant. Now, Willie, who knows? Okay, so line. Right now, I think that you look at the interior, there's a lot of competition between younger players and older players. And I think that the good news is they hit the portal for Torricelli Simpkins and Kamar Bell. Are those guys both starters? I don't know. But they're going to push Trevon Ball, and they're going to push Marquis Anderson to being the best they could possibly be, or whoever else plays guard, if it's Tree or whoever. Kamar started at Auburn, went to Florida Atlantic, played for Tom Herman. He's back at South Carolina now. And then Torricelli Simpkins, everybody you talk to loves the kid. And even internally, after he got to Carolina, that he could help us. 6'5", 320. And so you got massive competition in there. Tackle's a different story. Casey Henry and Ja'Kai Moore are your starters right now. They do need another one. I mean, you'd have Parks from Oklahoma that came in, is kind of competing out there. But it could be that they have to go with Josiah Thompson and Tree again out there, or they have to go with Casey Henry and Josiah Thompson. I will say this. I don't think starting Josiah Thompson would be a reason for mass panic. I think in other programs that recruit 5-star offensive tackles, which is what he was, those 5 stars sometimes come in and start and play well. Mitch Hyatt, we remember him from Clemson, the kid Caden Proctor, who caused all that ruckus at Alabama, started for them last year. Now, were they perfect? No. But were they maybe better than what they had the year before? Absolutely. So it could be Josiah. But in an ideal world, you get a veteran in from the portal, hopefully, good luck, and you bring him along, and the younger guys along a little slower. I think, Chris, this year, it's hard to imagine them not being better, but what does that mean? Because they were so bad and banged up last year. Just being healthy, they'll be better. I do think they're about a year away from having something really good on the O-line. Like about give it till 2025 for them to be, top half of the league up front, But, hey, Vershawn Lee's back, really good player at center. I think when he's at center, he's at his best. And then we'll see about the rest. But it's been promising. They have more depth, more players. But got to stay healthy for goodness sake. And then some of these young guys are just going to have to come on and battle. And I think one of the ways to do that is competition, and they've got it.
JC, from the updates and the intel you received, has anything from spring ball surprised you when it comes to South Carolina? Either a particular player, a scheme, just a storyline? Has anything jumped out to you or stood out to you as a surprise this spring?
Larvadane being as good as they're talking. I mean, I had some expectations for him, but you're coming from the MAC. You're not a huge guy. That surprised me. Not that Oscar Attaway was a player I looked at and went, well, he's a backup, but obviously Howell coming from SC State intrigued me a little more in the Derek Watson comparisons, and then Rocket, of course, did. So he's kind of a forgotten man, but absolutely they feel really good about him. Kind of surprised Ja'Kai Moore has been going out there with the number one at left tackle. I thought maybe we'd already settled that he was more of a guard and played tackle out of necessity. Maybe it is a necessity. Who knows? Maybe they just put a guy in front of Josiah and said, go beat him out. I don't know. I don't know what the thought process is there. I'd be surprised if he were the starting left tackle. If he is, I wish him the best because he's a great kid and deserves all the success in the world he gets. But that was a little bit of a surprise there for me. And I don't know, you can't read too much into live practice reports, but having Doty out there taking snaps, I mean, I get it, because if something happened, let's say Ashford and Sellers got hurt, Chris, Luke Doty's the starting quarterback this time. I mean, they're not going to go to Reno. Davis Bevel is not a fit for what they're trying to do on offense unless they can just line up and run it all over everybody, which I doubt they'll be able to do out of the eye. Play action, but so that kind of surprised me. I'm kind of like, man, but you never know. That may have been the only time he took snaps. So you just don't know with practice. But as far as the things that have kind of caught my eye, surprising, those would be it. It's not. I don't think it's been like the most eventful spring practice, which is probably a good thing when you're talking about getting ready for a season where you have to rebound.
Mm-hmm. JC, the Garnet and Black Spring Game sits just over 2 weeks away. Your thoughts on what you're most looking forward to, what you want to see, what you're expecting to see. Again, I know it's really hard to draw conclusions from spring practice, much less a spring game, but certainly when you've got newcomers or new guys at quarterback, Lenoris Sellers trying to win that QB1 job, I'm sure a close eye will be kept on that. Just again, what you're expecting from the Garnet and Black Spring Game in just over 2 weeks.
Lots of walk-ons playing second half. and I'm again, gosh, what's his name?
JC, are you a big spring game guy? I mean, do you, because I feel like with the spring game, most of the time, admittedly, the hype outweighs, it is a glorified scrimmage at the end of the day. I mean, we can all admit that.
I like to evaluate talent, right? And so to me, I get a kick out of as an evaluator back in the, I used to do it for a living. You watch so many camps and so many stupid practices, and you're like, you just try to get as much as you can, but it doesn't. When the pads come on and you start hitting, that's the beauty. That's the beautiful part of it. Even at some events like the opening, in previous years. The Nike sponsors where the linemen have been in shells, you know, and have got to hear the pads pop. That's so much more valuable than, you know, watching them run around in shorts and a t-shirt. So I like that aspect of it. It's just, I don't always get a good look at some of the players I want to. And then we found out through the years here, a good spring game performance means absolutely nothing. In a lot of ways. I mean, Elijah Davis had a really good spring game last year. I don't think he played very much. You know, this guy from Chapman, and I will say this, I'm gonna give it, I got his name here, Andrew Colasurdo. This guy, the last 2 spring games, you put him out there, he's running all over the field, linebacker, making tackles, all that. I think he's played special teams. You know, that guy looks great out there in the spring game. You never hear from him during the season. The few times he has gotten in during the season, though, he's made plays for some reason. But yeah, I like watching him play in the spring setting. You know, some of these younger guys will be good to see. I doubt, though, just because, you know, with injuries, with how this program's just suffered badly with the injury bug, I think they're going to be very careful with their primary guys and make sure that, you know, they're not out there for an extended period of time. And, you know, it would be just so unfortunate if, you know, in the third quarter of the spring game, if somebody gets hurt. I mean, that's just not, it happens, but it's not good. And we all saw that with Nichols last year kind of set the tone. So we'll see what happens. But, yeah, I'm looking forward a little bit to seeing kind of run game wise, even though it'll be base, kind of what exactly it looks like the basis of it. Is it what Sean has been doing his whole career, which nobody's really ever figured out how to stop it? At Georgia State, you know, they'd get beat 56-10 and have 200 yards rushing, you know, at that level against everybody. So is it going to be that? Is it more of what we saw with Kendall Browse at Arkansas? You know, how does Lenoris throw the ball? Because, you know, half the fan base thinks the kid can't throw a lick, and I don't understand that. But then he's not going to be Spencer Rattler throwing the ball either, you know. So if he starts having like a Luke Doty type outing from a few years ago where, you know, everybody hated from then on, oh, he can't throw the ball, you know, and that's ridiculous. But Chris, I'll remind everybody, Chris Smelly won spring game through 5 interceptions. And I think that team won. He led them to 7 wins the next year, you know, and played pretty well. I mean, you know, Steven Garcia, you can ask him how many good spring games he had, you know, same with Jake Bentley. I mean, you know, all the good, I mean, you just can't tell. But in my heart, you know, for his sake and everybody else's sake, so half the fan base doesn't have a heart attack, I hope he throws the ball well, you know, when they do throw it. So we'll see what happens. But I'm going to actually be there in person for the first time. And
Nice.
in a long time. I don't think I've been to a spring game since 15, 16, something like that. So I'm looking forward to getting down there and going and watching the baseball series with Arkansas and just hanging out and getting an up close look at these guys. And so it'll be good. But yeah, the throws, the run game, all that. I don't think you're going to be able to tell much with defense because they're going to line up in base anyway. So if whether that's 3 or 4 man front, I don't think it matters. But those are the things I kind of look for.
JC Shurburtt of the Big Spur inside the Gamecocks. You can check him out. JC, let folks know where they can find all your work.
Sure. Yeah. www.thebigspur.com. We're the media outlet from 24/7 Sports. We have a robust message board. It's one of the biggest online communities on the internet for sports, any sport. And check me out there. You can check me out on Inside the Gamecocks, the show. It streams 11 to 2 Eastern every single day, Monday through Friday. Chief Sports app. You could download that off the App Store or check us on YouTube, youtube.com/Chief Sports South Carolina. And those are the 2 primary Gamecock oriented places you can find me.
JC, appreciate you taking the time, man. Always a pleasure. Let's do it again soon.
Thanks, Chris. Take care, man.